It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend in the woods, away from the noise and stress of the city. I had packed my tent, sleeping bag, water flashlight, and my handgun, just in case. I had a license for it, and I felt safer knowing I had some protection. I drove to a secluded spot near a lake, where I had camped before. It was a beautiful place, surrounded by trees and wildlife. I set up my tent, made a fire, and cooked some dinner. I enjoyed the peacefulness of nature, listening to the sounds of the birds and the water. In the evening at around 7 p.m., I decided to go to bed, since I was feeling tired from the drive. I zipped up my sleeping bag, closed my eyes, and fell asleep quickly. I don't know how long I slept, but I was suddenly awakened by a loud noise. It sounded like someone was trying to open my tent flap. I felt a surge of fear and adrenaline. Who could it be? I grabbed my handgun from under my pillow and pointed it at the tent flap. I shouted, "Who's there? Get away from my tent or I'll shoot." But there was no answer, only silence. I waited for a few seconds, hoping it was just a false alarm. But then I heard it again, the sound of the zipper being pulled down slowly. I panicked and fired a warning shot, hoping to scare away whoever it was. The sound was deafening in the quiet night, and I heard footsteps of someone running away. I unzipped the tent flap and looked outside. I saw a dark figure disappearing into the trees. I couldn't tell who it was or what they wanted. I was too scared to chase them. I just stayed in my tent, holding my gun, hoping they wouldn't come back. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I kept thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't had my gun with me. As soon as the sun rose, I packed up my things and left. I didn't bother to clean up or anything. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. I drove back to the city feeling shaken. I reported the incident to the police, but they said they couldn't do much without any evidence or description. They said I should be more careful next time, but there won't be a next time. I'm never going camping again. It's too dangerous and scary. I don't want to risk my life for a few days of fun. I'd rather stay in the safety of my home, where I can lock the doors and windows and sleep soundly. Camping is not for me. I wanted to go on a camping trip in my camper van. It seems like a fun and adventurous way to explore new places and enjoy nature. So I packed my bags, loaded some food and water, and set off on my journey. The first few days were amazing. I drove through scenic routes, visited small towns in Camden, beautiful spots. I felt free and happy away from the stress and noise of the city. I didn't have a fixed plan. I just followed my instincts and the road signs. On the 5th day, I decided to drive deeper into the woods. I had seen a sign for a national park that looked promising. I thought it would be nice to spend a night in the wilderness, surrounded by trees. I drove for a few hours, until I reached the dirt road that led to the park entrance. I paid the fee, got a map, and drove in. The park was huge and mostly empty. I saw a few other cars and campers, but they were far apart. I drove around looking for a good spot to park my camper van. I wanted to be close to a lake or a stream so I could have some water and a nice view. After a while, I finally found a perfect spot near the edge of the park. It was a small clearing, next to a creek, with a fire pit and a picnic table. There was no one else around, and the nearest road was at least a mile away. I parked my camper van, got out, and stretched my legs. I felt the breeze on my face. I heard the sound of water and birds. It was peaceful and relaxing. I checked the time and the weather on my phone. It was 6 p.m. and the sun was setting. The weather app said it was going to be a clear and cold night, with a low of 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I put on a jacket and turned off my phone. I made a fire, cooked some dinner, and ate it at the picnic table. I watched the sky turn from blue to pink to purple, and saw the stars come out. I felt a chill in the air and moved closer to the fire. I took out a book and read for a while. I was enjoying the solitude and the silence, feeling cozy and content. I decided to go to bed around 10 p.m. I put out the fire, cleaned up the table, got inside my van, and locked it. I turned on the lantern and read some more. I was feeling sleepy. I decided to turn off the lantern and close my eyes. I fell asleep quickly and had a dreamless sleep. I don't know how long I slept, But I woke up suddenly, feeling alert and scared. I didn't know what had woken me up, but I had a bad feeling. I listened carefully, trying to hear any sound. I heard nothing except for the creek and the crickets. I tried to calm down and told myself it was nothing. I closed my eyes again and tried to go back to sleep, but then I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. Footsteps outside my camper van. Someone was walking around slowly and quietly. I froze and held my breath. I hoped they would go away and leave me alone. But then I heard another sound. Whispers outside my camper van. Someone was talking, softly and low. I couldn't make out what they were saying. Two people. They sounded like men, and they sounded like they were up to no good. I felt a surge of panic, so I quickly ran towards the front side of the van, started it, and drove away from there. I had always wanted to go camping in Montana, the state where I lived. I had heard so many stories about the beautiful scenery, the wildlife, and the adventure. So when my friend Jake invited me to join him and his family for a weekend at Big Arm, Flathead Lake State Park, I jumped at the chance. We arrived at the campground on Friday afternoon and set up our tents near the shore of the lake. The campground was spacious and well-maintained with picnic tables, fire rings, and restrooms. The lake was stunning, with clear blue water and a view of the mountains. We spent the rest of the day swimming, fishing, and playing games. That night, we gathered around the campfire and roasted marshmallows. Jake's dad told us some scary stories. I laughed along with the others, but I felt a chill in the air. The next day, Jake and I decided to go for a hike in the forest. We packed some snacks and water, and grabbed the map from the ranger station. We followed a trail that led us deeper into the woods. Away from the campground, the forest was quiet and peaceful, with only the sound of our footsteps and the occasional bird. We stopped at a clearing and ate our lunch on a log. We were about to resume our hike when we heard a loud roar. Sounded like a bear, but much more angry and fierce. We froze and looked around. We saw a large dark shape moving through the trees, about 100 yards away. It was a grizzly bear and it was heading towards us. We panicked and ran. We knew we were supposed to stay calm and back away slowly, but we couldn't think clearly. We just wanted to get away from the beast. We ran as fast as we could and quickly climbed the tree that looked easy for us to climb. We got as high as we could and hoped the bear would not follow us. But we were wrong. The bear was not deterred by the tree. It started to climb after us, using its powerful claws and teeth. It was getting closer and closer, and we could see its saliva dripping from its mouth. We were terrified and had no weapons to defend ourselves. Then I remembered something. I had a bug spray in my backpack that I had brought for the mosquitoes. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. I grabbed it and waited for the right moment when the bear was about to reach us. As I sprayed it in its face, aiming for its eyes and nose, the bear roared in pain and stopped. Climbing, it shook its head and tried to wipe off the spray. It was blinded and confused and lost its grip on the tree, fell to the ground. With a loud thud, we breathed a sigh of relief and thanked God for our luck. We waited for a few minutes to make sure the bear was gone. Then we climbed down the tree and ran back to the trail. We followed it back to the campground. I told our story to Jake's dad. He was shocked. I'm glad that we were alive. I decided to book a site at the Beartooth Lake Campground, which is located in the Shoshone National Forest in Cody. The campground has 21 sites, each with a picnic table and a fire ring. It is surrounded by mountains, forest, and a crystal clear. It sounded like the perfect place to relax and enjoy nature. I arrived at the campground in the afternoon, after driving for several hours from my home in Cheyenne. I checked in at the ranger station and got the map and the rules of the campground. I was assigned to site number 12, which was near the lake and had a nice view of the sunset. I drove to my site and set up my tent and sleeping bag. I also brought some food, water, and a flashlight. I didn't bring much else, since I wanted to travel light and experience the wilderness. After setting up my camp, I decided to explore the area of. I walked along the lakeshore, admiring the reflection of the mountains and the clouds on the water. I saw some ducks and fish swimming in the lake, and some squirrels and chipmunks running around the trees. I felt a sense of peace and wonder, as if I had entered a different world. I also took some pictures with my phone, so I could remember this moment. As I was taking pictures, I noticed something odd in the distance. It looked like a large dark shape moving in the woods. It was hard to tell what it was, but it seemed to be bigger than a bear. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was not alone in this place. I quickly turned around and ran back to my campsite, hoping that whatever it was, it wouldn't follow me. I reached my site, got inside my tent, and zipped it up. I knew it wouldn't be able to stop any animal, but it made me feel a little safer. I tried to calm myself down and rationalize the situation. Maybe it was just a moose and I had mistaken it for something else. Or maybe it was just my imagination and there was nothing out there at all. I told myself that I was safe in my tent, and that nothing could hurt me. I tried to ignore the sounds of the night and the fear that was growing inside me. I don't know how long I stayed awake, but it felt like an eternity. Couldn't sleep, and I couldn't relax. I kept listening to the noises outside. As I was laying there, I suddenly heard something that made my blood run cold. It was a loud, piercing scream, coming from the direction of the lake. It sounded like a human, but also like an animal. It was full of pain, and it stopped as soon as it had started. I was terrified. I didn't dare move a single muscle. I didn't want to sleep, but eventually fell into a restless sleep. I woke up in the morning to the sound of birds chirping. I was still scared, so I packed up my things and left the campground. To this day, I still wonder what made that scream. I wanted to go camping, especially after seeing the beautiful pictures of the mountains, lakes, and forests online. I decided to book a spot at Camping Jungfrau, a holiday park in the Bernese Oberland region. It was one of the best campsites in Switzerland, according to the reviews I read online. It had a restaurant, a shop, and a bar. It was also close to the famous Starbuck waterfall and the Jump Rog, the highest railway station in Europe. I arrived at the campsite on a sunny afternoon in July. I checked in at the reception and got a map of the area. I chose a pitch near the edge of the forest, away from the other campers. I wanted some peace and quiet, and I also liked the idea of being close to nature. I set up my tent, unpacked my stuff, and went for a walk around the campsite. It was a lovely place, with green grass, colorful flowers, and a clear view of the snow-capped mountains. I saw some people swimming, boating, and fishing on the lake. I also saw some children playing on the playground and the mini golf course. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. After a while, I decided to go to the restaurant for dinner. I ordered a cheese fondue, a typical Swiss dish, and a glass of wine. I enjoyed the food and the atmosphere, and I chatted with some of the staff and the other guests. They were very friendly and helpful, and they gave me some tips on what to see and do in the area. After eating, I went back to my tent. I was feeling tired after a long day of traveling and exploring, so I decided to go to bed early. I zipped up my sleeping bag and closed my eyes, listening to the sounds of the night. I felt relaxed and happy, and I drifted off to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still dark outside. I heard footsteps outside my tent. They came right over my tent and then circled my tent a few times. I froze in fear, wondering who or what it was. I hope it was just another camper, maybe someone who had lost their way or needed some help. But then I heard a voice, hello, in raspy voice, that made my blood run cold. It was a man, and he was mumbling something. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but it sounded like a foreign language, maybe German or Italian. He sounded angry and crazy, and I had a bad feeling about him. I didn't dare to move or make a sound, hoping that he would go away, but he didn't. He kept walking around my tent. He even touched my tent a few times, as if he was trying to find a way in. I was terrified, and I wish I had a weapon or anything to defend myself. But I had nothing except my sleeping bag and my flashlight. I felt helpless and hopeless, and I pray that he would leave me alone. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally walked away into the woods. I heard his footsteps fade away, and I breathed the sigh of relief. I was still scared, but also relieved that he was gone. I wondered who he was and what he wanted. I couldn't sleep the whole night. Every little noise made me jump. When finally morning came, I got out of my tent, looked around, but I didn't see any footprints. That was so strange, I thought. How could he walk around my tent without leaving any traces? I was so scared and didn't want to stay there any longer. So I packed up my stuff and left the campsite as soon as possible, because I wanted to go home and forget about the whole experience. I always wanted to go camping in Alaska, ever since I saw the pictures of the stunning landscapes and wildlife. I decided to take a trip to one of the best campsites in the state, Wonder Lake Campground, located deep inside Denali National Park. It was supposed to be the closest campground to Denali, the highest mountain peak in North America, and offer breathtaking views of the surrounding scenery. I arrived at the campground in late August. After taking a bus ride from the park entrance, the campground was fairly large, with 28 sites spread over a grassy area near the lake. There were no trees or shelters, just open space in sky. The weather was mild and sunny. I set up my tent near the edge of the lake, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mountain at sunrise. I spent the afternoon exploring the nearby trails, admiring the wildflowers and the wildlife. I saw moose caribou, foxes, and even a grizzly bear from a safe distance. I returned to the campground before dusk, cooked some dinner on my portable stove, enchanted with some of the other campers. They were all friendly and enthusiastic, sharing stories and tips about their experiences in the park. I felt a sense of camaraderie and belonging, as if we were all part of a special club. I went to bed early, looking forward to waking up to a spectacular view of Denali. I crawled inside my tent, got inside my sleeping bag, and closed my eyes. I drifted off, back to sleep, dreaming of mountains and lakes. I woke up at around 6:30 a.m. I rubbed my eyes and looked through the fabric of my tent. I froze in horror at what I saw. There was a person standing outside my tent. I could not see their face, only their silhouette against the sky. I felt a surge of fear and panic, and quickly shouted, "What do you want?" As soon as they heard my voice, they turned around and ran away. I heard their footsteps fading in the... When they were gone, I crawled out of my tent, packed up my stuff and left. I still don't know who that person was. I decided to go to one of the best campsites in Canada. It was called Alice Lake Provincial Park Campground, and it was located in British Columbia near the town of Squamish. The campground was surrounded by towering mountains, dense forests, and grassy areas. It also had 4 freshwater lakes that were perfect for fishing and swimming. I booked a site online and packed my tent, sleeping bag, fishing rod, and some food and drinks. I arrived at the campground in the afternoon and checked in at the office. The staff was friendly and gave me a map of the park. They told me that my site was number 37 near the edge of the forest. They also want me to be careful of bears and cougars that sometimes wandered into the campground. They said that I should keep my food in a bear-proof container and make some noise when I walked in the woods. I thanked them and drove to my site. When I got to my site, I set up my tent and unloaded my stuff. The site was spacious and had a fire pit, picnic table, and a water tap. I could see the lake from my tent in the mountains in the distance. The scenery was breathtaking. After a while, I decided to go fishing, so I grabbed my fishing rod and headed to the nearest lake. The lake was calm and clear. I saw some ducks and geese swimming on the surface and some fish jumping out of the water. I found a nice spot on the shore, cast my line, and waited for a bite, while enjoying the peace and quiet. After a while, I caught a couple of trout and decided to head back to my site. I cleaned the fish and put them in a plastic bag. I planned to cook them over the fire later. Walked along the trail that led to the campground. I didn't see anyone else on the way. It seemed like I had the whole park to myself. When I reached my site, I noticed something odd. My tent was open and some of my stuff was scattered on the ground. I felt a surge of panic and ran to check what was missing. I saw that my food, drinks, and flashlight were gone. I also saw some footprints around my tent. Someone had came to my site while I was gone. I felt angry and violated. Someone had invaded my privacy and taken my belongings. I decided to go to the office and report the incident. I packed up what was left of my stuff and folded my tent. I put everything in my car, drove to the office, and told the staff what had happened. They apologized and offered me a refund. They also said that they would investigate the matter and contact me if they found anything. I thanked them and left the park. I felt disappointed and frustrated. I had hoped to have a relaxing and enjoyable time at the campground, but instead I had a terrible experience. To this day, I still don't know who stole my stuff. I decided to take a solo trip to one of the best campsites in the state, Didnana RV Park and Campground. It was located in a small village near the Nana River, surrounded by forests and mountains. The campground offered RV sites and cabin rentals. I chose the 10th site since I wanted to experience the outdoors as much as possible. I arrived at the campground in late September, hoping to catch the fall colors and avoid the crowds. The weather was chilly, but not too cold. The campground was almost empty except for a few RVs and a couple of cabins. I checked in at the office. Weather-friendly owner gave me a map and some tips on where to hike and fish. He also warned me about the bears and told me to store my food and trash in the bear-proof containers provided at each site. He said that there had been some sightings of a large grizzly bear in the area, and that I should be careful. I thanked Tim and drove to my site, which was near the edge of the campground close to the river. I set up my tent, unpack my gear, made a fire, cook some dinner, and enjoy the peacefulness of the place. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in orange and purple hues. I felt relaxed and happy. After a while, I decided to go for a walk along the river. Before it got too dark, I grabbed my flashlight camera. I'm headed to the trail that followed the riverbank. I walked for about 20 minutes, admiring the beauty of nature. The river was clear and calm, reflecting the trees in the sky. I saw some fish jumping out of the water and some ducks swimming by. I took some pictures and felt a sense of awe. I was about to turn back when I heard a loud splash from the other side of the river. I looked across and saw a huge shape emerge from the water. It was a bear, a grizzly bear, and it was staring right at me. It was the biggest bear I had ever seen, at least 8 foot tall, with a massive head and a hump on its back. It had dark brown fur, wet and matted from the river. It had a scarred face and a fierce expression. It looked angry. "I'm hungry." I froze in fear. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I knew I had to act fast and follow the rules of their safety. I slowly backed away, keeping my eyes on the bear, and speaking in a calm and firm voice. I said something like, "Hey bear, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just leaving. Please don't come any closer." I hoped the bear would lose interest and go back to the river, but it didn't. Suddenly row. It was a terrifying sound, loud and deep, that echoed through the forest. It showed its teeth and its claws and looked ready to attack. "Ipan," and did the worst thing possible. "Iran." I turned around and sprinted back to the trail, hoping to reach the campground before the bear caught up with me. I knew it was a mistake, but I couldn't help it. I was too scared to think clearly. I ran as fast as I could, but I knew the bear was faster. I heard it behind me, crashing through the bushes. I'm gaining on me. In a moment of desperation, I quickly climbed the nearest tree and went as high as I could. I knew the bear could climb the tree, but I had no other options. The bear did try to climb the tree, but it couldn't. It was too big and heavy, and the branches were too thin, and we could snap some of them with it. Just wait, and fell back to the ground. It growled and snuggled and circled the tree, looking for a way to reach me. I was trapped, but at least I was alive. I stayed on the tree, praying for the bear to leave. I was cold and scared. The bear kept circling the tree, growling and scratching. Tried to climb the tree again, but failed. After what seems like an eternity, the bear finally gave up. He realized that I was not worth the effort and that there were easier prey elsewhere. It walked away. I disappeared into the forest, leaving me alone. I breathed a sigh of relief, and thank God, I was safe for now. I waited for a few more minutes to make sure the bear was gone. I looked around and saw no sign of it, so I decided to get down from the tree and head back to the campground. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down. I was sore and tired. I checked the time and saw that it was almost midnight. I had been on the tree for over 2 hours. I walked back to the trail and followed it to the campground. I was alert. I looked for any signs of the bear. What are the dangers? I heard some noises, but they were from harmless animals. When I reached the campground, I felt so conceived. I saw the lights of the office and the RVs. I saw some people and heard some voices. I was not alone anymore. I ran to the office and knocked on the door. The owner opened it and looked surprised. He recognized me and asked me what happened. I told him about the bear and how I escaped. He was shocked. He said I was very lucky. He also offered me a cabin for the night. He said I could stay there for free and that he would take care of my tent and my gear. He was very kind and helpful. I thanked him and spent the night at the cabin. No, I always carry a bear spray while camping. I decided to take a solo van camping trip to one of the best campsites in the state, Wonder Lake Campground. It's located inside Denali National Park, and it offers stunning views of the mountain and the lake. I heard it's a great place to see the northern lights too. I arrived at the campground in the afternoon after driving for hours on the park road. The campground was not very crowded, as it was late September and the weather was getting colder. I found a nice spot near the lake and parked my van. I set up my campsite and then decided to take a walk around the lake. It was a beautiful day, and I enjoyed the fresh air and the scenery. I saw some moose and caribou grazing in the distance, and a few birds flying overhead. I felt peaceful and relaxed. I returned to my van before sunset and cooked some dinner on my portable stove. I ate inside the van and then got ready for bed. I had a sleeping bag and a blanket, and I was cozy and warm. I looked outside the window and saw the stars shining brightly. I hoped to see the northern lights later, but I was too tired to stay awake. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep. But in the middle of the night, I woke up to a loud noise like something hitting the side of my van. I jolted and felt my heart racing. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on. I looked around and saw nothing. I thought maybe it was a branch falling from a tree. What a gust of wind. I tried to calm myself down. I told myself it was nothing. I turned off the flashlight and lay back down. I heard the noise again, louder and closer. It sounded like something was scratching the metal of my van. I felt a surge of fear and turned on the flashlight again. I looked out the window. I saw a large dark shape moving around my van. It looked like a bear. Dust scratching stopped after a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I held my breath and hoped the bear would go away. I heard heavy footsteps circling around my van and then moving away. I waited for a few more minutes until I was sure the coast was clear. I looked out the window and saw no sign of the bear. Eyesight and relief, and thank my lucky stars. This was the scariest experience of my life. I had never been this close to a bear before, and I hoped that I would never be again. I love camping, especially in the beautiful state of California. There are so many amazing places to explore, from the mountains to the coast, from the forest to the deserts. One of my favorite campsites was Ventana Basin in Big Sur, a 10-only site nestled into a canopy. Any of redwood trees. The giants provided shade that kept me cool. Even in summertime, the site had parking spots, campfire rings, picnic tables, and clean restroom facilities with private showers. It was also pet-friendly, so I could bring my dog with me. One weekend, I decided to go solo camping at Ventana Basin. I wanted some time to relax and enjoy nature by myself, so I packed my tent, put sleeping bag, food, flashlight, and other essentials. I also brought a book, a camera, and a guitar to keep myself entertained. I drove to the campsite on a Friday afternoon and checked in at the office. The staff was friendly and helpful and gave me a map of the area. They told me that the site was not very crowded and that I could choose any spot I liked. I drove around the campsite, looking for a good spot. I saw a few other tents, but most of the sites were empty. After a while, I finally found a nice spot near the edge of the campsite, close to creek. It was quiet and secluded and had a great view of the redwoods. I parked my car and unloaded my gear. I set up my tent, made a fire, cooked some hot dogs and marshmallows. I need them with Max. He seemed to enjoy the camping trip as much as I did. He ran around the site sniffing and exploring. I played with him for a while and then decided to read my book. I sat on a log and opened my book. I read it for an hour until the sun started to set. When the sun was starting to set, I put away my book because I wanted to watch the sunset. I walked to the creek and followed it downstream. I saw some beautiful scenes and snapped some photos. The sky was orange and purple, and the water reflected the colors. The redwoods looked majestic in the fading light. I felt a sense of awe and wonder. I walked for about 15 minutes until I reached the bridge, crossed the creek, and led to a trail. I decided to cross the bridge and see where the trail went. I thought it would be a short walk, and then I would be back before dark. But as soon as I crossed the bridge, I felt a chill. The air was colder on the other side, and the trees were denser. The trail was narrow and winding, and seemed to go deeper into the forest. I looked at my watch and saw that it was almost 7 p.m. I realized that I should turn back and head to my campsite. I didn't want to get lost in the dark, so I turned around and started to walk back. That's when I heard it. A scream, a loud, piercing human scream, came from behind me, and it sounded like a woman in pain. It lasted for a few seconds and then stopped. I froze and felt a surge of fear. Who was that? What was happening? Was someone in trouble? I knew mountain lions can make these screaming sounds, so I decided to play it safe and hiked back to my campsite. I didn't hear anything strange, like screams for the rest of my stay, but I still to this very day wonder, who made that sound? Was it someone who really needed help? Or a mountain lion? I guess I'll never know. I decided to go to a remote forest area that I had heard about from a friend. He said it was a beautiful place, with a clear lake, a waterfall, and a lot of wildlife. He also warned me that it was not a popular spot, and I might not see anyone else there. That was fine by me. I wanted some solitude and quiet. I drove 4 hours until I reached the entrance of the forest. There was a sign that said, "No camping beyond this point." I ignored it. I wanted to explore the forest and find the best spot for my tent. I parked my car on the side of the road and grabbed my backpack. I locked the car and started walking into the woods. The forest was amazing. The trees were tall and green, the air was fresh and cool, and the sounds of birds and insects filled my ears. I followed the narrow trail that led me deeper into the forest. I saw some squirrels, rabbits, and deer along the way. They seemed curious about me, but not scared. After about an hour of walking, I reached the lake. It was as clear as glass, reflecting the blue sky and the white clouds. I saw some fish swimming in the water, and some ducks floating on the surface. I walked around the lake until I found the waterfall. It was a small one, but still impressive. The water was falling from a high cliff, creating a misty spray. I felt the droplets on my face and laughed. This was the perfect place for my camp. I set up my tent near the waterfall on a flat patch of grass. I unpacked my stuff and put them inside the tent. I also took out some food and water and placed them on a nearby rock. I was hungry, but I decided to eat later. I wanted to enjoy the view first, so I grabbed my flashlight, sat on the rock and looked at the lake. It was so calm and peaceful. I felt a wave of happiness wash over me. I was glad I came here. I had everything I needed. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the waterfall. It was soothing and relaxing. I felt myself drifting into a nap. I don't know how long I slept, but when I woke up it was dark. The sun had set, and the moon had risen. The lake was glowing with a silver light, and the stars were twinkling in the sky. It was a beautiful sight, but also a bit scary. I realized that I was in the middle of nowhere, with no one to help me if something went wrong. I felt a chill run down my spine. I reached for my flashlight, but it was not there. Someone had taken my flashlight. While I was asleep, I felt a surge of panic and anger. Who would do such a thing? I got up and ran to my tent. I opened the flap of my tent and looked inside. I guessed that what I saw. There was a bloody handprint on the ground my tent. It was fresh and wet, dripping onto the floor. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I backed away from the tent and scanned the area, but I didn't see anyone or anything in the dark forest. I felt the adrenaline pumping through my body, so I quickly packed all of my stuff and left. I still don't know who made that bloody handprint inside my tent. I had been to many campsites in Colorado, but this time I wanted to try something new. I searched online for the best campsites. I found one that caught my eye: Zion's Watchman Campground in Utah. It was located in National Park, a stunning place with red rock cliffs, canyons, waterfalls, and wildlife. The campground had 176 sites, some with electric hookups and some without, and was open year-round. It also had restrooms, showers, a dump station, and a shuttle service to the park's main attractions. It sounded perfect for me. Packed my tent, sleeping bag, another essentials, and drove to Utah. Took me about 8 hours to get there from Colorado, but I didn't mind. I was excited to see the park and camp under the stars. I arrived at the campground around 4 p.m. and checked in at the entrance station. The ranger gave me a map and assigned me a site in the non-electric loop. He also warned me to keep my food and trash secure, as there were bears and other animals in the area. He said I could use the bear-proof lockers at the site or store my food in my car. He also advised me to stay on the trails and avoid hiking alone at night. He said the park was beautiful but also dangerous, especially for solo campers. I thanked him for the tips and drove to my site. I set up my tent on a flat spot near a large cottonwood tree. The site was spacious and had a make table, a fire ring, and a metal locker. I put my food and trash in the locker and locked it with a padlock. I looked around and saw that the campground was almost full. Do you have a family? Couples and groups of friends in the other sites chatting, cooking, and playing games. I felt a bit out of place, but I didn't mind. I was here to enjoy nature, not socialize. I decided to go for a hike before it got dark. I grabbed my backpack, water bottle, and map and headed to the shuttle stop. I boarded the shuttle and got off at the Zion Canyon Visitor Center. I checked the trail map and shows a moderate hike to the Emerald Pools, a series of waterfalls and pool. What's the canyon wall? It was about 3 miles round trip and had some elevation gain. It sounded like a good way to stretch my legs and see some scenery. I followed the signs to the trailhead and started walking. The trail was well maintained and easy to follow. Across the bridge over the Virgin River and then climbed up a series of switchbacks. I enjoyed the views of the canyon and the river below. The red rocks contrasted with the green vegetation and the blue sky. It was a beautiful day, warm and sunny. I saw some other hikers on the trail, but not too many. I greeted them as I passed by and continued on my way. I reached the lower pool after about half an hour. It was a small pool at the base of a waterfall. The water was clear and cool. I dipped my hand in and felt the refreshing touch. I took some pictures and then moved on to the middle pool. It was a bit larger and had a higher waterfall. I saw some fish and frogs in the water. I sat on a rock and ate some snacks. After eating my snacks, I decided to go to the upper pool, the last and largest one. It was another half-mile uphill. I resumed my hike and followed the trail. It became steeper and narrow. I had to scramble over some rocks and roots. I noticed that there were fewer people on this section of the trail. I guess that most hikers turn back at the lower or middle pools. I didn't mind. I liked the solitude and the challenge. I reached the upper pool after another 20 minutes. It was worth the effort. It was a large pool surrounded by cliffs and trees. The waterfall was impressive, cascading from a high ledge. The pool was deep and I couldn't see the bottom. I walked around the edge of the pool and found a spot to sit. I took out my water bottle and drank some water. I looked at my watch and saw that it was 6 p.m. I realized that I had to hurry back to the campground before it got dark. I didn't want to hike in the dark, especially alone. I packed my backpack and got ready to leave. I took one last look at the pool and the waterfall. I felt a sudden chill, as if someone was watching me. I turned around and scanned the area. I saw no one. I shrugged and told myself that it was just my imagination. And then I started walking back to the trail. That's when I heard it. Aloha Grill, coming from behind me. I froze and slowly turned my head. I saw a large dark shape emerge from the shadows of the trees. It was a mountain lion. It was staring at me with yellow eyes. It was only about 10 feet away from me. It looked hungry and angry. I felt a surge of fear and panic. I had heard stories about mountain lions attacking hikers in the park. I had also read the signs at the visitor center, telling me what to do in case of an encounter. I tried to remember the advice. I knew I shouldn't run or turn my back, but I didn't know if I could do it. I sit still and faced the mountain lion. I raised my arms and waved them. I shouted at the mountain lion, trying to sound brave and confident. I said things like, "Go away. Leave me alone." I hoped that the mountain lion would get scared and run away, but it didn't. Kept staring at me, growling and snarling. It took a step closer to me. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the mountain lion. I reached for my backpack, hoping to find something to use as a weapon. I had a hunting knife, a flashlight, and a whistle. I grabbed the knife and held it in front of me, pointing it at the mountain lion. The mountain lion ignored the knife and kept advancing. It was now about 5 feet away from me. Crouch. Intense muscles. It was ready to pounce. I knew I had no time to waste. I threw my backpack at the mountain lion, hoping to distract it or hit it, but I missed. The backpack landed on the ground a few feet away from the mountain lion. The mountain lion ignored the backpack and focused on me. Elite at me, aiming for my throat. I dodged to the side, barely avoiding its claws and teeth. I felt a sharp pain in my arm where it scratched me. I screamed and stabbed the mountain lion with a knife. I aimed for its chest. I hoped to kill it, to make it stop. I hit it and felt the knife sink into its flesh. I felt its blood on my hand. The mountain lion let go of me and stumbled back. It looked at me with a mix of shock and fury. It looked at the knife in my hand. It turned and ran away, limping and bleeding. It disappeared into the trees, leaving me alone. It was over. I had survived. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. I felt a wave of relief and disbelief. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I couldn't believe I had fought a mountain lion in one. My arm was bleeding and there were a lot of scratches on my body. I knew I had to get medical attention. I got up and grabbed my backpack. I put it on and checked the contents. I still had my water bottle, my flashlight, and my whistle. I drank some water and cleaned my wounds as best as I could. I wrapped them with some bandages and cloth. I turned on my flashlight and started hiking back. I hiked back to the campground by myself, got into my car and drove to the nearest hospital. I love camping in my van. It gave me a sense of freedom and adventure, and I enjoyed exploring new places and meeting new people. I had been traveling around Alaska for a few weeks, and I decided to spend the night at one of the best campsites in the state, Wonder Lake Campground. Wonder Lake Campground is located 85 mi deep into the interior of Denali National Park. It is the closest campground to Denali, the highest mountain peak in North America. The views from the campground are breathtaking, and you can see the reflection of the mountain on the clear water of the lake. The campground has 28 sites, each with a picnic table and a fire ring. There are no hookups or showers, but there is a potable water pump in a vault toilet. The campground is very popular in the summer, but I was lucky to find a spot in late September, when the crowds had thinned and the fall colors had set in. I arrived at the campground in the afternoon, after driving for hours on the bumpy park road. I checked in with the campground host, who gave me a friendly welcome and some tips on how to avoid bears and moose. He also warned me that the nights were getting cold and frosty, and I should be prepared for any weather changes. I thanked Tim and drove to my site, which was near the lakeshore. I parked my van, got out, and stretched my legs. I felt a chill in the air, but I was also excited to be in such a beautiful place. After a while, I decided to take a walk around the lake and enjoy the scenery, so I grabbed my camera, a jacket, and a can of bear spray. I'm headed to the trail. The lake was calm and serene, and I could see the snow-capped peak of Denali in the distance. I snapped some photos and admired the golden leaves of the birch and aspen trees. I walked for about an hour and then decided to head back to my site. The sun was setting and the sky was turning pink and purple. I quickened my pace and followed the trail. After a while, I reached my site, got into my van, put my camera and jacket inside, and then grabbed some firewood and matches. I decided to make a fire and cook some dinner. I got out of my van, lit the fire, put a pot of water on it, opened a can of soup, and poured it into the pot. I started and waited for it to boil. I looked at the lake and saw the last rays of the sun disappearing behind the mountains. After eating my soup, I roasted some marshmallows. I enjoyed the warmth and the crackle of the fire and the sweetness of the marshmallows. At around 8 p.m., I decided to read a book and then go to sleep. I put out the fire and got into my van. I locked the doors, closed the curtains, turned down a small lamp. I picked up a book. I read for a while and then felt sleepy, so I put the book down and turned off the lamp. I crawled into my sleeping bag, closed my eyes, and fell asleep quickly. But I woke up in the middle of the night to a loud bang. I jolted up and looked around. It was dark, and I could not see anything. I heard another bang and then a scraping sound. It sounded like metal on metal. I realized it was coming from outside. Someone was trying to break into my van. I felt a surge of fear and panic. I looked for a weapon, found a knife, held it in my hand. I heard another bang and then a thud. Someone had climbed on top of my van. I heard footsteps on the roof of my van and then a creak. Someone was trying to open the roof vent. I felt a cold sweat and pounding heart. I do not know what to do. I quickly made a decision. Sprinted to the driver's seat, started the engine, slammed the gas pedal, and the van lurched forward. As it did, I heard a loud thud behind me. The person who was on the roof had fallen off. I did not look back to see who it was, and drove away as fast as I could. Hiking is one of my favorite hobbies. I like to explore new places and enjoy the nature. That's why I decided to go on a solo camping trip to my favorite site in the mountains. I had been there many times before, and I knew the area well. I packed my tent, sleeping bag, water, flashlight, and other essentials, and set off on a sunny morning. The hike to the campsite was about 3 hours long, but I didn't mind. I enjoyed the scenery, the fresh air, and the exercise. I followed the trail that I knew by heart, and soon I reached the spot where I usually pitch my tent. It was a flat clearing surrounded by trees with a nice view of the valley below. I was looking forward to spending the night there under the stars. I quickly set up my tent, and then decided to go for a walk around the area. I wanted to see if anything had changed since the last time I was there. I grabbed my backpack and headed out. I walked along the trail, admiring the beauty of the forest. I saw some birds, squirrels, and deer, but nothing else. After a while, I was about to turn back when I heard a rustle in the bushes. I stopped. I looked around. I thought it might be a small animal, like a rabbit or a fox. I was curious, so I decided to check it out. I walked towards the sound and part of the branches. What I saw made my heart skip a beat. It was a mountain lion. It was about 10 feet away from me, staring at me with its yellow eyes. I froze and felt a surge of fear. I had never seen a mountain lion before, let alone so close. I didn't know what to do. I remembered reading somewhere that you should never run from a mountain lion, because it would trigger its hunting instinct. So I just stood there, staring at the beast, hoping it would go away. And thankfully, by some miracle, The mountain lion turned around and ran away, leaving me alone. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had just escaped a possible death. I didn't waste any time. I quickly ran back to my tent. I packed everything and left the campsite. I didn't want to stay there any longer or risk another encounter with the mountain lion. I hiked back to my car as fast as I could. When I finally reached my car, I drove away. I never looked back. I still love camping, but I don't go to that site anymore. I love camping, especially in Colorado, where I lived. There was something about being in the wilderness that made me feel alive and free. That's why I decided to go on a solo camping trip to Moraine Park Campground, one of the best campsites in Colorado. It was located in Rocky Mountain National Park, and it offered stunning views of the mountains and the meadows. I heard that it was also a great place to see deer and bighorn sheep, which I always wanted to witness. I packed my tent sleeping bag, food, water, and other essentials, and drove to the park. I arrived at the campground in the afternoon and found a nice spot near the river. The campground was spacious and well maintained, with picnic tables, fire rings, and flush toilets. There were only a few other campers around, and they seemed friendly and respectful. I set up my tent and then went for a hike around the park. The scenery was breathtaking, and I felt a sense of peace and wonder. I saw some wildlife, such as elk, deer, and birds, but nothing too dangerous. I returned to my campsite before sunset. I made a fire, I cooked some dinner, and then sat by the fire enjoying the warmth and the stars. I felt happy and relaxed, and I look forward to seeing more animals in the morning. Around 10 p.m., I decided to go to bed. I put out the fire and crawled into my tent. I set up my sleeping bag and closed my eyes. I was about to fall asleep when I heard a loud noise outside. It sounded like something heavy was moving around and breaking branches. I froze and listened carefully. I realized that it was a bear and it was coming closer to my tent. I felt a surge of fear and wondered what to do. I remember that I had stored my food in a bear-proof container and hung it on a tree, as the park rangers had advised. I hoped that the bear would not smell it and leave me alone. I also remember that I had a can of bear spray in my backpack, which was inside the tent. I reached for it and held it in my hand, ready to use it if the bear attacked. The bear was now right outside my tent, and I could hear a breathing and sniffing. Panicked, but I did not make any noise. I hoped that the bear would not notice me and go away. I stayed still and held my breath. After a few seconds, it just walked away slowly. Without doing anything, it left me alone and went back to the woods. I did not know why the bears spared me, and I did not care. I was relieved, ungrateful. I was alive, and I had survived. I got out of my tent, packed everything, and left. I had been camping alone in the woods for a few days, enjoying the peace and quiet of nature. I had a small tent, a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and some basic supplies. I didn't have a phone or a radio because I wanted to disconnect from the world for a while. On the third night, I woke up around midnight with a strong urge to pee. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped my tent. I stepped out into the dark and looked around for a good spot to relieve myself. As I scanned the area, I noticed something that made me freeze in fear. About 20 feet away from my tent, there was a van parked. It was a white, rusty, and windowless van, with no license plate or markings. It looked very suspicious and out of place in the middle of the woods. I quickly got back into my tent and zipped it up. I tried to calm myself down and think of a rational explanation. Maybe the van belonged to some other camper who had arrived late and parked near me. I decided to wait until dawn before doing anything. I didn't want to confront the van's owner in the dark, or draw attention to myself. I hoped they would just go away and leave me alone. I turned off my flashlight and lay down in my sleeping bag. I tried to fall asleep, but I couldn't. I was too scared and alert. I kept listening for any sound or movement outside my tent. I wondered what the van's owner was doing. I must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I opened my eyes and looked at my watch. It was around 6:30 a.m. I unzipped my tent, peeked outside and felt relieved. The van was gone, but I still didn't want to risk it. So I packed up my stuff and decided to cut my camping trip short. I didn't want to stay in the woods any longer. I hiked back to my car, which was parked a few miles away at the trailhead. When I got to my car, I got in and drove away. I don't know what that van was doing there or who was inside it, and I don't want to know. I wanted to go camping in Big Sur, California. It was a dream of mine to see the rugged cliffs, the redwood forests, and the Pacific Ocean. I had booked a campsite at 5 for Big Sur State Park, a popular spot for nature lovers and hikers. The park had over 150 campsites, some with electric hookups and some without. I chose the primitive site as I wanted to experience the wilderness as much as possible. I arrived at the park in the afternoon, after a long drive from Los Angeles. I checked in at the entrance station, got my permit, and drove to my campsite. It was a nice spot, secluded from the other campers, surrounded by trees in a small creek. I set up my tent, unpacked my gear. I decided to go for a walk before it got dark. I grabbed my backpack, a flashlight, and a map of the trails. I wanted to see the McWay Falls, a stunning waterfall that dropped 80 feet into the ocean. I followed the signs to the trailhead, which was about a mile from my campsite. The trail was easy to follow, mostly flat and well-maintained. I enjoyed the views of the mountains, the forest, and the creek. I saw some birds, squirrels, and deer along the way. I felt relaxed and happy, breathing in the fresh air and listening to the sounds of nature. I reached the falls after about an hour of walking. They were even more beautiful than I had imagined. The water was clear and blue, cascading over the rocks and into the cove below. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the scene. I took out my camera and snapped some pictures, checked my watch, and realized it was getting late. So I decided to head back to my campsite, as I didn't want to be on the trail after dark. I packed up my things and started to walk back. I turned on my flashlight, as the light was fading fast. I followed the same path I had taken before, hoping to get back before nightfall. I was about halfway back when I heard a loud noise behind me. It sounded like a branch snapping, or something heavy falling. I turned around and saw a large dark shape moving in the bushes. It was hard to see clearly, but it looked like an animal, a big one, maybe a bear, or a mountain lion. I felt a surge of fear and panic, but I decided not to panic and not to run away. I thought that running would only trigger its chase instinct and make it more aggressive. I tried to calm myself and slowly hiked back. I kept hearing wrestling behind me, but I didn't turn to look at what it was. I hoped it would lose interest and leave me alone. I walked as fast as I could, without breaking into a run. I prayed that I would reach the campsite safely and that there would be other people there. I glanced at my watch and saw that it was almost dark. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead and a knot in my stomach. I wondered how far I was from my campsite and how long it would take me to get there. After a while, I reached my campsite safely and quickly got inside my tent. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Every little noise made me jump. When finally morning came, I quickly packed everything and left. I had set up my 10-year small cabin that looked abandoned. I figured no one would mind if I used their fire pit. In the evening, I cooked some food and enjoyed the sunset, feeling happy and calm. I didn't see or hear anyone else around, so I assumed that was alone in the woods. Around 10 p.m., I went inside my tent to sleep, but just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a loud notification sound right outside my tent, and then I heard a whisper sing, OS asterisk asterisk asterisk. After that, I heard footsteps running away from my tent. I was stunned. I had so many questions but no answers. I felt a mix of relief and confusion. I checked my phone again, but there was no signal. Couldn't sleep anymore. I stayed awake until the morning, clutching my phone and listening to every sound. I wondered if they would come back, or if they were watching me from somewhere. I felt paranoid and scared. As soon as the sun rose, I packed up my stuff and left. I drove away, feeling shaken and disturbed. I still don't know who that person was outside my tent. I never found out, and I never want to. I decided to camp at the Wonder Lake Campground, one of the best campsites in Alaska. It was located in the Denali National Park, surrounded by stunning mountains and wildlife. The campground had 28 sites, each with a picnic table and a fire ring. There were also vault toilets and a water pump. I arrived in late September, hoping to catch the fall colors and avoid the crowds. I set up my tent near the lake, which offered a breathtaking view of the snow-capped peaks. After setting up my tent, I decided to go for a hike around the area, following the trails that led to the McKinley River and the reflection pond. I saw some moose, caribou, and foxes along the way, but no bears. I had read that bears were common in the park, and that I should be careful with my food and trash. I had brought a bear-resistant container to store my supplies, and I planned to hang it from a tree at night. I returned to my campsite before sunset. Feeling hungry and tired, cooked some noodles on my portable stove and ate them while watching the sky turn from blue to go to pink. I felt a chill in the air. I decided to start a campfire. I gathered some dry wood and lit it with a match. The fire crackled and warmed me up. I felt cozy and relaxed, enjoying the solitude and the silence. I was sitting near my campfire, and all of a sudden I heard a loud thud from the right side. I looked there and saw a huge bear charging at me. I felt a surge of fear and panic. I had no time to grab my bear spray or my whistle. I had to act fast. I quickly picked up a log from the fire and threw it at the bear's face. It hit its nose and the bear roared in pain. It stopped for a moment, shaking its head. I saw some sparks fly from the log and smelled sunburned fur. I seized the opportunity and ran to my car, which was parked nearby. I got in and locked the doors. I looked at my campfire and saw the bear running away. It had probably decided that I was not worth the trouble. I breathed a sigh of relief and thanked God for saving me. I was shaken by the encounter and decided to leave the campground as soon as possible. I packed up my tent and my belongings and put them in the trunk. I drove away, feeling lucky to be alive. I realized that camping in Alaska was not as easy as I had thought. It was a beautiful and wild place, but also a dangerous one. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Never underestimate the power of nature, and always be prepared for the unexpected.